So, I like to take people through some basic instructions and kind of guidance on meditating and just help you, hopefully, to get comfortable and to be present. So, I begin by just really trying to come into stillness in the body. So, just sitting in a way that you can be alert and relaxed, settled. You can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. And having a sense of the body softening, of letting go. It can be helpful to focus on particular points in the body where tension tends to accumulate. So try relaxing your jaw and then really your whole face, your eyes, your forehead, and then releasing your shoulders. See what that feels like. And soften the belly. See if you can do that. You can maybe take a deeper breath and let the belly expand and then just release. So there's a sense of letting go of the body, or a sense that the body is being drawn down towards the earth. And even as we make this effort, we might notice that there are points of tension or tightness or anxiety in the body that don't release. And that's okay. We're not trying to control our experience so much as be aware of it and hold it with kindness. So each of us carries a certain amount of discomfort in our bodies we discover as we bring mindfulness into those sensations. Just having an attitude of openness and acceptance. This is, this is the truth. This is the reality of living in a body, that it's not always pleasant. Much of that challenge might be more on the emotional level, although it can also certainly be on the physical level for those of us with chronic pain or chronic challenges in the body. So mindfulness asks us to face these experiences, to examine our relationship to our body, see the ways that we ignore the body or ways that we obsess about the body, ways that we're afraid of our body, ways that we try to control the feelings in the body. And these are the tendencies that we do try to let go of. Oh, trying to have a very simple and direct relationship to the sensations in the body, just feeling them for what they are, not resisting, not grasping. Connecting with the breath is one of the ways that we do this. We use the breath as a focal point, a concentration object. Just feeling the sensations of breathing. Wherever you discover those sensations, it might be at the nostrils, the air coming in and out. Or you might be mindful of the movement of the chest or the belly. There's nothing special about the breath that we're trying to be aware of, just to feel whatever we can feel. Sometimes that will be very distinct, and other times more vague, just a general sense. Whatever you can feel, whatever you can be aware of, that becomes your focus. What happens when you just try to simply pay attention to the breath? Oftentimes, the busyness of the mind will take you away. That's a normal, natural part of working at this practice. The simple response to the wandering mind is to just come back to the breath again when you notice that the mind is wandering. You notice thoughts. You don't need to add anything to that, like a doubt or self criticism, judgment of our meditation. Just accepting that this is what's happening. Mm, Thoughts, the thinking actually becomes part of the meditation rather than seeing it as external or a problem. Just being mindful that a thought is happening. What does that feel like? What happens in your body when you're in thinking? What happens to your emotions with different thoughts? So we start to see all these connections quite intuitively. You don't have to really make a special effort, just mindful of the experience. Always remembering that we have the breath as a home to return to, a safe place. Breathing in, breathing out. All right. Um, so um, one of the elements of my teaching philosophy, my meditation teaching philosophy, is to leave space for quiet rather than guiding the whole time. Because my hope always is that um, I'm helping you to learn to meditate on your own. Because if you're going to have a regular practice, you need to learn to sit on your own. And although there certainly are, these apps now and so many different sources where you can get guided meditations, ultimately, I think it's really helpful to develop a sense of independence in your own practice, where you're not depending on someone else's voice or guidance all the time. Uh, because we want to really be able to internalize the practice so that we have um, these skills to draw upon in ordinary life, in daily life. So I mentioned that I wanted to talk today somewhat about Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, and I had read the quote from him that's in my book, Burning Desire, in Step 7, where he says that uh, we beseech the law of karma through our actions, not merely with words. And and this comes out of I mentioned this series of lectures, and I actually found this little booklet, uh, which is entitled "Christianity and Buddhism: The Sinclair Thomas Memorial Lecture," and it's a series of, or it's a lecture that uh, Buddhadasa gave in looks like 1967 in Thailand, and as the title implies, it was about um, discussing the connections between Christianity and Buddhism. And so, in one breath at a time, I drew from this, and I want to pull out some of the quotes and kind of go through some of these ideas. I think they're interesting and at times somewhat opaque, uh, but nonetheless really worth sort of looking at. And again, Buddhadasa, the name, when you're a monk, of course, you get given a name, a monastic name. And uh, if you're familiar with Ram Dass, uh, Ram Dass, the famous American um, guru, Ram is a Hindu name for a god, and Das means servant. Buddhadasa means servant of Buddha, uh, which I like. um, so I'm just going to let me start by going through a few of the things that Buddhadasa said in these lectures about these comparisons. So, as I said, some of them are quite striking. There's a section called God, the Creator, the Ruler, the Destroyer, and the Omnipresent. So you can see, if you're familiar with Christianity, which I suppose most Westerners are, although I don't know if my daughter knows anything about it, having been raised in atheist Berkeley. But so he says, God, the creator of the world, is known by the term avidya, which is Pali, which means ignorance. Which you say, what? Wait. The creator of the world is ignorance. And so this goes back to what the Buddha said in the cycle of dependent origination. How does suffering start? It starts with ignorance. So it's this implication, really, what it comes down to, and this is kind of sad, but it's kind of saying we are born because we have this belief, an ignorant belief, that life is going to bring us some ultimate satisfaction, but it never does. And that belief is ignorance or wrong view. So that's how everything begins. That's a very deep Buddhist concept and doesn't really fit with much, it doesn't really fit with Christianity. Where I can, if we want to put it into recovery terms, our addiction starts with the belief that by using this substance or acting on this behavior, I'm going to find some satisfaction, right? Which is wrong. It's, and in Buddhist terms, ignorance. That is, it's a misunderstanding about how things work. You know, you drinking and using don't make you happy, right? So it's like seeing how the starting point of the road to hell that somebody mentioned. Oh, that was hell freezing over. Yes. The starting point of the road to hell is misunderstanding that this is getting on the wrong road, right? Oh, it's just like, no, that's wrong. So anyway, he says, the God who repents that he has made a mistake in creating the world, which is apparently in Genesis, is known as wisdom. I love that because it's just so counter to anything any like Westerner would think, what? So the natural knowledge that is the opposite of ignorance, it realizes that the creation of anything is the creation of dukkha. Well, this is not easy, to take. Like it's really that it can really be taken as this nihilistic view, which is not where it's going, right? Because there is this path out. If this were the end point of Buddhism, you'd say, oh, I mean, this is just like this, end it now. But the point is that there's a way to freedom, right? But this incredibly uh, honest and realistic view of how things work. Humans, we don't really want to see our lives as being what they are, you know. And the basic thing that we don't want to see is that we're going to die, you know, and that everything is going to be lost, and that probably we're going to be sick and in pain before we die, So that and that's kind of what this in some ways is about, that there isn't some end point of some wonderful end point where we get it all and we get to retire and be, happily ever after. But all of this is trying to encourage us to take refuge, to be present, to be awake and let go of clinging, because it's the clinging it's the clinging to some idea that I'm going to get fixed. When I let go of that, just as with our addiction, when we let go of that clinging to the addiction, that's where the freedom comes. And again, it's very counterintuitive to how we think about things and how we relate to the world. We relate to the world as this place where we have to get satisfaction out of it. We have to go out there and fight and get what we want. And it's like, no, that's actually creating more of a problem. So it says, God, the ruler of the world, who punishes and rewards creatures, is known as karma, or the law of karma. This is the natural law that has the highest authority when it comes to overseeing the world. Now, this starts to sound more like Christianity, right? Unfortunately, it's you're going to get punished if you do bad things. But of course, you know, the uh, karma is for one thing, it's more complicated than can be summed up in a few, commandments or rules. Um, but we do get guidelines about what creates positive karma, what creates negative karma, and there's kind of these levels where there's this very worldly level of karma where it's, that where our alcoholism and our addiction exists on that kind of worldly level of behavior, which is, a foundation. But then in order to build towards the karma of freedom, the karma that leads to freedom, we have to go beyond just the worldly behavioral things and train the mind, train the heart, cultivate wisdom, cultivate insight, cultivate mindfulness, cultivate loving kindness, compassion. And all those things are what then raise the consciousness to the point where there's this, where through these karmic causes, cause and effect, that then this breakthrough of release called enlightenment can come. He says, God, the destroyer of the world, is also known as Vijja, or wisdom, knowledge in its capacity to bring all suffering to a final end. So again, this kind of counterintuitive thing, and maybe this relates to Shiva in the Hindu view of, Shiva, the creator and the destroyer. But this idea, because that's Shiva is, revered in Hinduism, right? Whereas in our culture, we would think of something that destroyed things, maybe in this, at least in simplistic terms, as being something destructive, and it is literally destructive, but something that was negative. But what Buddhadasa is talking about is destroying ignorance. It's also kind of sounds like Noah Levine's Meditate and Destroy. If you've ever seen that sweatshirt that the Dharma punks wear, which I've had my problems around that idea, but it's, I get it. It's just that we can misinterpret what destroying means. So knowledge in its capacity to bring all suffering to a final end. So destroying ignorance. And he says, the omnipresent or omniscient God, so that nothing done by humanity escapes God's gaze, again, is known as karma, or the law of karma. And for those of you who were brought up in a religious and Christian background, and you were taught that God sees everything, God knows everything, which is what they taught us in Catholic school. You get a little freaked out. You're like, oh man, like can't get away with anything, right? And it's kind of Santa Claus. He knows where you've been good or bad. He knows if you've been sleeping. He knows if you're awake. Knows if you were good or bad. So be good for goodness sake. To quote the poet. But interesting, again, because this explains what that Christian teaching means. This idea, again, like as a kid, you're hearing, oh, God is like this being that's watching you. It's got like a million eyes or something, or somehow is everywhere. And you're like, how can God be everywhere at the same time? That doesn't make any sense. And then, eventually you might be like, oh, forget it. I don't believe in God because God can't be everywhere. Right. But then if you come to understand and believe in the law of karma, you realize, oh, that's actually true. Like, when I hide in the closet with the bag of potato chips, I still gain weight if I eat all the potato chips. That's implied, of course. Why would I be in there? And that's karma, right? There's nobody else knows, but the law of karma knows. So cause and effect operates whether anybody else knows about it or not, or whether you even know about it. Whew. scary. So then he says, however, all the things that we above called ignorance, knowledge, and karma can be covered by the single term Dhamma or Dharma. So this is why I entitled this book, the subtitle Dharma God, right? Moreover, such things as kindness, goodness, beauty, justice, truth, and anything else that is God or an aspect of God are included under Dharma. So that to me, I find that very touching and beautiful, and this is why, when we take refuge in Dharma, there's something devotional about it. It's this beautiful thing. We're really taking refuge in wisdom. We're taking refuge in truth. We're taking refuge in loving kindness. So then, this is pretty deep today. I hope it's not whatever unpleasant in any way. It says, what we call Dharma is the God of Buddhism, and we can distinguish 4 primary aspects of it. So this, I think, should be the last thing I go through, but this was, so, and I cover this in one breath at a time. So 4 primary aspects of God: nature itself, the law of nature, the duty of humans according to the law of nature, and the fruits that human beings receive according to the laws of nature. Now, we have to go over this, and I will. But first of all, just to point out that when you have a list of 4 in Buddhism, something should go off in your mind, like 4. Isn't that important? What's the important thing that's 4 in Buddhism? Oh, yeah, right. The 4 Noble Truths. Oh, can we make a connection here with the 4 Noble Truths? Let's see. So what he says, the first aspect of God is nature itself. What's the first noble truth? The truth of suffering, which is just a law of nature, right? That there is suffering in the world, that birth is suffering, aging is suffering, death is suffering, etc. The second of these aspects of God, the law of nature, the things that govern nature. What's the second noble truth? The cause of suffering, right? So it's like the law that determines why there is suffering. So these first 2 are fairly simple. Nature, which, when you think, okay, God is nature, so, okay, you're having a blizzard in Austin, that's God. Well, great, awesome, nice. I thought it was unpleasant. It's actually God. Oh, well, God isn't always pleasant, I guess. In any case, it's all, we see it like, things happen. Why is there weather? Why is there climate change? It's just nature. So, it's, and what are we going to do about that? Well, we're going to accept it, right? And then the law of nature, so, and what might also say, karma is the law of nature. The third of these aspects, this is where it starts to get a little surprising, I think, because the first 2 are very clearly things that are connected with an ordinary sense of God. Excuse me. The duty of humans according to the law of nature. That's kind of a strange thing, but it's saying, like, this is the way things are, and if you behave in accordance with the law, it's all good. If you don't, you're going to get the karmic results of that. Well, that makes sense, right? We know that's true. You don't get away with anything. That takes you back to the law of karma, being everywhere and knowing everything. So the third noble truth is called the truth of the end of suffering, which says that if we let go of our clinging, or we could say, if we live in accordance to the laws, then freedom will come. I connect it to the second step, that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore sanity. It's the stage at which we realize, oh, freedom is possible if we follow, if we act skillfully. And then this fourth element of God, according to this, is the fruits that human beings receive according to the law of nature. So that, in Buddhist terms, that means ultimately that if you live in accordance with the Dharma, that you become awakened, that you attain freedom, and that freedom actually releases you from the suffering, from that ignorance, from what comes from the ignorance. And so this is the fourth noble truth, the way to the end of suffering. I'd actually say, in terms of the Four Noble Truths, I realize now that I should flip these. That the duty of humans according to the law of nature is the fourth noble truth, because that's the Eightfold Path. And then the fruits that come is the third noble truth. But I'm maybe confusing you if you're not that familiar with the Four Noble Truths. The point being that there's nature, there are laws of nature, then we have our relationship to those laws. And depending upon how we behave in relation to those laws, that determines whether we suffer or not, essentially, right? If we make wise choices, if we act skillfully, we can actually end suffering. If we make unwise choices, we create more suffering. And, seems pretty evident that this describes exactly addiction and recovery, making unwise choices or making wise choices. So I know this is a lot, and fortunately this is being recorded, so you can always go back and listen to it again if you're really interested. But I just find it that I've always just found this to be really interesting thinking on his part. That Buddhadasa really kind of he took this comparison of Christianity and Buddhism very seriously. It wasn't just a superficial thing. He really was like studying the Bible and then finding what he saw as parallels. And I was just looking at his Wikipedia page this morning, actually, and it was saying that he really believed that there was one truth, you know, um, and that the heart of every religion contained that same truth. Not everybody agrees with that. I know there are very uh, um, notable Buddhist scholars who disagree with that, who feel that uh, there are aspects of Buddhism that are not reconcilable with other religions. It's worth exploring. This isn't a theology class, though, so we don't have to go uh, suffer or create suffering around that. Um, so, um, what I like about this ultimately is that it takes the idea of God out of the kind of mystical, magical, you know, incomprehensible area into something that kind of makes sense. Like, oh yeah, nature and the laws of nature, karma. Oh yeah, right. Actions have results. Oh, I see. If I don't understand things, if I have this thing Buddhists call ignorance, then I do stupid stuff and I create suffering. When I understand it and I act wisely, I don't. And that's all God. Yeah, it is kind of God, isn't it? I mean, that's what seems to determine the way the world plays out. I can look at politics, I can look at relationships, I can look at economics, I can look at any human activity and see that it contains all of this, and that it's all operating within these laws, within these forms. And I can see that. So, the term God applies. Now, I know some people can't accept, you know, just redefining God in this way. Again, is someone who, Noah Levine uh, is someone who, he and I could never reconcile our differences over this issue, but I find it really useful. So I'll open it up for any questions. Oh, I wanted to mention before I do that I am tonight, uh, 7 p.m. I'm teaching for the Napa Valley Insight group, and I'm starting a series on the Eightfold Path that I'm going to do once a month over the coming months. So I'm giving a talk tonight on right view. And then this weekend on Sunday, Vimala Sara and I are co-teaching a half day. And it's some kind of recovery-based thing. We're doing it through the Garrison House, and all that stuff is on my website, if you go to the calendar on my website, you'll see I just made sure everything was up there. The Sunday thing is 10 to 2 Pacific time, so that'll work, across the country and into Europe. But after this week, things are getting simpler, I'm hoping. You've not been able to connect with the Napa Valley Insight, huh? I don't know why that is, Abigail. I'll look for it for you. Or Angela, would you look that up, Napa Valley Insight? Let's put that link in there. Thanks. So anybody want to comment or say anything over this dense material this morning? Wasn't as, light as I like it to be. You can just unmute yourself, or maybe I fried everybody's brains.
Hi, Kevin. I'm Desea in Montreal.
Hi, Desea. It's nice to hear from you.
It's so nice to be here today.
Yeah.
We're snowed in, so schools are closed. I get
Right.
time
Good.
with you. But the one thing that I'm so grateful for is the language that you provide me and probably many people with, because in recovery, in the 12 steps, I have a real issue with God, the God word. It makes me very uncomfortable. And everything that you explained today and shared with us, it feeds, it gives me the tools to understand and to express myself better with newcomers who just are in a lot of pain. And as soon as they hear God, they're like, no, the 12 steps, it's not for me. But it makes perfect sense to me, nature and the laws of nature.
Yeah.
And so I just want to thank you, because it's really helped me to have that vocabulary.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, me too. I mean, if you're looking for a power greater than yourself, all you have to do is look out the window, right? Oh yeah, right. I'm snowed in. It's more powerful than me. And what are you going to do? Of course, you turn your life over to that. Because if you fight it, it just creates suffering. So it's some ways it can be quite simple. Thanks, Desea. Nice to see you. Chris, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, how's it going?
All right.
So earlier in the meeting, you were mentioning the analogy of sitting in the closet eating chips, and how there's a karmic effect of that, even though there might not be some sort of present God that's smiting you for, eating those chips. There's this intrinsic effect of that, and that can be almost thought of as karma in some sense. And I'm just trying to see if I understand this right. Could you understand that as, every action that we make, every thought that we think, every word that we speak at a neurological level is almost creating grooves of patterns in our mind that reinforce certain behaviors. And if we reinforce positive behaviors and positive thinking, then the karmic effect will be to overall lift up the way that we perceive the world. And if those grooves are going down dangerous slopes and reinforcing bad patterns of behavior, like eating junk food in the closet, then that will be more habitual and will fall into those grooves more easily as we go on. And that, in essentially, can be thought of as sort of the consequences of our actions.
Exactly. I mean, I'm just sitting here listening to you going, wow, you're just like putting it perfectly. And, and, and you capture a couple things there. I think, first of all, it's like, uh, we could think of and maybe this isn't even just a metaphor, but like that every thought, word, or action has kind of like an energetic effect on ourselves or in the world, and that there's all this energy going around, right? And so that no matter what it is, there's that of this thought, this word, this action, that pulsing of energy that comes from that. But then, as you say, what becomes more important in terms of how our lives unfold and how the world unfolds is the repetition. And that the tendency is that when we have an experience or a longing that's pleasant, there is to repeat it. And it's the repetition, just as you described, that creates the kind of grooves. And apparently they do talk about these kind of neural pathways and being established, and that these kind of connections become, you use that part of your brain more to do that thing, and you default back to that, right? Which is exactly why we want to meditate a lot. The more you meditate, you develop those pathways, and you default to mindfulness and focus more. And yeah, and it's also, is quite obvious, a definition of addiction as well as recovery. And there's a famous line from one of the suttas: whatever one frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the tendency of mind. Whatever you frequently think and ponder upon, whatever you think about a lot, that's what you're going to think about a lot. It just is like, uh, yeah. And what a simple but profound truth. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Oh, thanks, Kevin.
If you were in my class, I would have given you A for that. You look young enough to be in my class. So, not that I have a class, but I have had anyway. Other thoughts, questions? We have a little more time.
What's wrong with this book? I love this book.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Wow, that's the second endorsement I've gotten today.
Kevin, it's Eleanor.
Yes.
I have a question about, you were citing a publication of Buddhadasa's
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
decades ago. Is that published work available?
Oof,
Or is it?
It maybe. I mean, I bought it, off the internet. It's like a used version, and I bought it like 15 years ago.
Can you show me the cover?
Yeah, it's called Christianity and Buddhism,
Cool.
and the subtitle is Sinclair Thompson Memorial Lecture. there could even be, you know, some just downloadable version of it. When I was working on One Breath at a Time, uh, um, the American monk who had been Buddhadasa's translator was doing a new translation of this. And a lot of my quotes are actually come out of his version of it.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Great. So it is 11 o'clock here in the western edge of North America. And so I guess that officially brings us to a conclusion. I'm you know, just hanging out. So if anybody wanted to ask one more question, I the rest of my day is just go to the post office, which probably won't take 10 hours. All right. So I'll be back on Friday evening at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And as I said, yeah, Vimalasara, who's one of my favorite people to teach with, will be doing an event for Garrison House on Sunday. And I should look up what that's called. Something about recovery. But as I said, after that, in the coming weeks, I don't have any other events until late March, other than these classes. So I hope everyone is well. And if you haven't started getting vaccinated, I hope you will very soon. Berkeley is doing a pretty good job. So things are starting to happen here. Maybe we'll do a little bit of loving kindness to close if anybody wants to hang out. And actually, let's do some loving kindness around illness. Just appreciating for a moment your own health, whatever. Hopefully you have it right now. And feeling your body and feeling how it functions when it's healthy, breathing in and breathing out, the heart beating regularly. And may all beings be healthy. May those who are ill recover. And may our wisdom increase. May we come to see that we all are sharing the same world, that whatever we perceive as differences are trivial, that we as human beings can and must live together in love and peace, and radiating outwards loving kindness and healing for all beings. May all beings be free from suffering. All right. Thank you. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay.
Kevin.
Peace.
Thanks, Kevin.